Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, September the 29th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walt and Jack show. So Walter, I'll start off, and this is a story that you provided. I'll just show, it says Canada's ambassador to Jordan linked to ISIS girls. Canada's ambassador to Jordan linked to ISIS girls. And basically it's the story of the three teenage girls who became quite famous, who ran away from home in London, England, I think, and then were smuggled across they went to Turkey, were smuggled across the border from Turkey into Syria. And I mean, it was a world famous story. And the story is that Stephen Harper is linked to these girls. So here's the story. The Turkish government claims that the Canadian embassy in Jordan aided the trafficking of British-born children and at least 17 others into the hands of ISIS in the middle of a war zone in Syria. The Ottawa Citizen has reported that the man who was recently caught by Turkish police trafficking the British-born girls between Turkey and Syria and into the hands of ISIS was CSIS agent Mohammed al-Rashid. Reports claim that al-Rashid reported to Bruno Saccomanni, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's personal security guard a few years earlier, who he then appointed as the ambassador to Jordan in 2013. The chain of command is quite clear. CSIS agent al-Rashid in Turkey reported to the ambassador in Jordan, Mr. Saccomanni, who reported to Stephen Harper. Harper appointed Saccomanni, who in turn recruited al-Rashid. These revelations from the Turkish government indicate Canada's Jordanian embassy collaborated with ISIS, an organization labeled as terrorists by the Canadian government. This leaves Canadians baffled about exactly what Harper and his Conservative government are trying to achieve. Is it a war on terrorists or a war using terrorists? And here we are in the middle of an election, Walt, where this is such an important issue. You know, when Harper said the other day, the enemy isn't CSIS, the enemy is ISIS. Well, you know, the whole situation is crazy.
Yeah, and you know, the commentary now, the most recent commentary by the pundits, they are admitting that the West is funding ISIS, but it all seems to be inadvertent. That the money is getting there, the guns are getting there, but that nobody meant to do it, sort of thing. But why I wanted you to read that, because it is quite, you know, it's quite remarkable when you think about it, that a CSIS agent that was Harper's personal bodyguard in Ottawa becomes the Canadian ambassador in Jordan. So he goes from a security guard to an ambassador, and he also is in charge of Iraq, because we don't have an embassy there. So the facade of any genteel facade that these embassies are supposed to be there just for diplomatic relations, you know, is completely tossed out, because we're sending a secret agent there to do the job. And that's so remarkable in itself. And then to see what happened right afterwards with the running of people across the border. Now, the Turkish government was making these claims. It was printed in the Ottawa Citizen. It was printed in the Toronto Star.
Globalresearch.ca.
Well, globalresearch.ca really put the meat on the bones here, and I refer to them in that article. But this is a mainstream, real story. This is not a conspiracy theory. This actually did happen. And the remarkable thing is, after listening to the so-called debate between the leaders last night, that was without Elizabeth May, the leadership debate for the prime ministership. This is an issue. This is one story that could blow Harper right out of the water. This would be the end of his career in any other world except the one we're living in which you get these three guys standing up there stoically, you know, not paying attention to what is reality, really. And we're supposed to buy that line that somehow or other this didn't happen, apparently, because they don't want to talk about it. And that's the world we're living in now.
That's the most amazing thing, that we have a federal election going on now in which the truth is not allowed to be spoken. The entire election is a sham. And both you and I bought the Times Colonist today in order to, I think, show this story. And it's about the Liberal candidate just north of Victoria. Island Liberal candidate resigns after 9/11 critique. And basically what she said is that she thought the official story was a lie. And this was a few years ago. Well, the official story is a lie. I mean, there's a group of 1,000, more than 1,000 architects and engineers, it's called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, who say it's impossible for the buildings to have fallen the way the official story says. It's just not possible. That's one of dozens of insane inconsistencies in the official story. But if you dare to say that, you cannot run in a federal election in Canada. So, I mean, that's the state of our nation right now. It's pathetic, and it's not the country we think we live in. That's clear. We live in a I don't know what.
Well, some people call it fascism, Jack. It isn't too far from it. You know, there's a facade that we can exchange ideas and everything, right up to the point where they become important ideas. And then if those ideas are not part of the narrative that the status quo wants, or the powers that run the networks, you can't say it, or your career is going to be shortened. Now, you can't have democracy when freedom of expression is suppressed. We have to be always vigilant to allow ideas. Remember when Ert Sundal and some of these Holocaust deniers were at it? I supported them. Come on out and say whatever you want. If it's a crazy idea, somebody else will refute it. We want to hear all these ideas, and sometimes we have to listen to some pretty repugnant views in order to maintain our liberties. This is a very serious business. I'm really concerned with that. This is a new trend in politics. They had it before. Harper was running it that way for a few years, but now the NDP and the Liberals are just about the same.
Yeah. And instead of discussing those issues, this is what else we have in the Times Colonist, and not only the Times Colonist, but all the media, especially the television and radio. Crime and violence, unknown rescuer halted sex assault at UVic. Why is that front page news and leading the news on CFAX? It's constant, you know. They fill the news with crime and violence, and they never have time to talk about the loss of our democracy, or the fact that we all have to eat genetically contaminated foods, whether we want to or not, and the fact that our healthcare system is being deliberately destroyed so it can be privatized. That's why people have to wait. People have to wait because corporate Canada wants you and us to suffer enough so that you and us will allow our healthcare system to be privatized. I mean, like, they're willing to kill people in order to get the money that they want from our healthcare system. It's being deliberately destroyed. That's never mentioned, and they fill us instead with crime and violence, never ending. And you can't, you know, you mentioned democracy. You cannot have democracy if you don't have a free press. We lost our free press a long time ago, and the democracy is, I would say, gone.
We don't want candidates looking over their shoulders and wondering if they had an extra glass of wine sometime and wrote something on their Facebook. You know, this is just ridiculous. You know, it's just like, we know the message they're sending out is that, you know, we don't have freedom of expression. The parties are telling us that now clearly, that you're not going to be able to participate. So what's going to happen in these upcoming elections as the views, the acceptable views, get narrower and narrower? Like you have the debate last night with the leaders. All I could see was, I couldn't see a debate. I saw three guys that all agree on pretty well everything that's important. And they pretty well agree on everything that's bad. You know, there's nothing good happening here. It's like, it's hard to pick between them because of especially foreign policy issues and warfare issues. And they're not rocking the boat. They're just pretty well going along with whatever the large corporate interests and the warmongers want to do. That's what those three parties are offering us. And at the same time, they're telling us that we can't say anything about it. It's going to become a time when just saying, hey, I disagree with you guys, will become a threat to national security or something. It's very dangerous times we're living in.
Yeah, that's it. It is dangerous times. To me, there are solutions out there. We've got to build an independent media, and we've got to really focus on building democracy. And I mean, the definition I like of democracy is from the Greek words demos, the people, and kratia, to rule. It means the people rule. Not the party leaders, not the corporations, not the corporate-owned media, not the business community, but the people. And our whole democracy, our whole form of government should be about the politician, the government, the people we elect, making sure we're fully and well informed on the important issues of the day, and then finding out what we want, and then trying to do that. And that's the exact opposite of what we have now.
And we send a representative to Ottawa. We don't send a political party to Ottawa. We send somebody that represents the majority of our views, and they go to Ottawa and see if they can hash it out with enough people to pass some legislation. That's the way it's supposed to work.
And I think if we had that, we'd have a much better country in many, many different ways.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say a word about Rifflandia, to bring it just down to a very local issue. Rifflandia, to me, it's many things to many people, but one thing it certainly is bullying. It's the bullying of thousands of people who were told by the city government of Victoria and all the businesses that are involved in Rifflandia. They're told, we're going to turn our music up for 2 or 3 or 4 days.
Just so you should introduce like what Rifflandia is.
Oh yeah, for those who don't know. It's a very, very loud rock concert that takes place in Royal Athletic Park. And it's, I mean, they just crank the music up. It's like there's very few restrictions. In fact, they waive the restrictions that there are for this to take place. And it's bullying. Again, amongst many other things, especially when there's an arena 2 blocks away where the loud music could be played. Which made me think about our schools and bullying in the schools, because what the schools really are is they're a place where children are forced to go into a situation where the people who run the show know they're going to be bullied and then don't protect them. It's like a deliberate thing, and it happens to a lot of kids, and I think that's what the people who run the country want. They want us bullied, so we're kind of more subservient.
Yeah, it all depends what your tastes are. A lot of people might love to hear rock and roll for free within the 2 miles of that stadium. Like, I would be with you. I think that's it's noise pollution. It's something that you haven't welcomed, and I think we should have more rights in that area. And there should be controls of that sort of thing happening, and I agree with that. We should try to put them inside.
Walt, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is segment 2 of Citizens Forum. We're going to be talking about the election. It's the Medi, Walt, and Jack show. Medi, there's only like 3 weeks to go. They tell us the economy is the big issue. So what have you got to say about it?
I thought it's very important to, at the beginning of the election call, economist Jim Stanford wrote a very good paper and showed that among all the administration after World War II in Canada, all the governments, Harper government has the worst record. And he looked at 16 economic factors, and in every one of them, either they come worse or second worst.
So in every, compared to every other government since World War II. I remember seeing that.
Yes. And then, for example, I give you a few examples of it. Job creation. They had the worst record of job creation among all the other government of Canada since World War II. In terms of GDP growth, average annual growth in GDP, adjusted for inflation, they came worst again. You know, there were 9 government and they came number 9th. In terms of export of goods from Canada, which show the health of the economy, they came 9th again, worst. And in terms of household debt, which show the economy of the people, you know, where they are, it came worse again. So when they talk about we should be very happy with the economic situation is good, if we have a balanced budget, or you know, the economic condition are good, are better than many other countries, they tell us. Whose economic condition are they talking about? Economic condition of ordinary Canadian citizens or the elite? When it's come to the economic condition of elite, they never had it as good. They are right. But when it's come to the ordinary citizen, the hunger, for example, child hunger, 12% increase just came out in a study from Toronto area, Greater Toronto area, 12% increase in use of the food banks. And we never had food banks in early 1980s in this country, or 1970s. What's happened? Because they are changing. The government, instead of working for you and me and representing us and work for our benefit, they are working for the benefit of the market. And who is market? Corporations. That is, so the government is there to manage us while implementing corporate agenda. And when they talk about the surplus, for example, the headline was, Federal Department left $8.7 billion unspent. That's how they got surplus. 1.1 billion of it was from Veteran Affairs. How many veterans committed suicide because they couldn't get the help because of the PTSD? 170, more than 170 committed suicide. And Mr. Harper is proud to have a surplus while he took $1.1 billion from Veteran Affairs budget and not spend it. And we have 170 people dead. Another one, $2.7 billion from unemployment insurance. They took $2.7 billion in order to make the so-called balanced budget. What's happened there? Here is the mothers. I have three examples of mothers, you know, and there is a huge group of them, more than 6,000. They are in a lawsuit now. That these mothers, for example, newly give birth to their kids. They have their maternity leave, and then right away they got into cancer, breast cancer, for example. They wouldn't give them money
from unemployment insurance.
From unemployment insurance. And so they have to go to court. The government lost in the court. They appeal these type of things in order to just act like a psychopath. You know? So you see, the government of Canada is not working for the people of Canada.
What I don't understand is, we have a whole election going on, and you're the only one who's saying this. I mean, how can we have an election when nobody is saying this?
We are going to get Mr. Harper re-elected because this phony opposition, they are not talking about his record. $350 million was taken from the budget of refugee budget. 350 in order to make their budget balanced. And there was a lots of cut to regulatory program. We talked about before about what's happened in Lac-Mégantic, what's happened with listeriosis crisis, because the regulatory programs are being weakened, people they don't need. Another things, they cut down the research station. They fired more than 2,000 scientists. They destroyed the science libraries of Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, Fishery and Ocean Canada is gone. And they say, oh, we are very good government. We have a balanced budget. Yes, if you destroy Canada and have a balanced budget, I don't know if that's such a good idea.
It's crazy.
We had to kill the patient to save them. I mean, the thing that you mentioned, I mean, I've always believed, Mehdi, that in this day and age that countries can sort out their differences. When there's hot spots, when things flare up into armed struggles, that we have the resources to go there, help people to settle their differences peacefully. And Canada's sending soldiers into harm's way now to carry out the foreign policy agenda of Stephen Harper and his friends. And these people are being slaughtered. And when what's left of them, when they come back home and try to repiece their lives together, their backs are turned on them by the very government that sent them there. In most cases, in my view, in wars that are unjust. Now, that's not the soldier's problem. That's not the soldier's job, is to decide what is a just war. But to me, it's just even more galling to see that happen, that they're destroying these lives and then they're not giving us any chance at all to try to recover,
You're absolutely right. And Mehdi, what you say, it's just so shocking to hear it because nobody else is saying it.
They don't want to talk about these things because none of them want to change. These cuts has been done they are not saying if they are going to reverse the process.
Yeah.
You mean the Liberals and the NDP?
Yes, and when Mr. Marker saying the most important principle for him is balanced budget, that means all these cuts is going to remain. Let me talk about Mr. Marker a little bit, because people don't know. Mr. Marker, when he talk about balanced budget, that means he is embracing neoliberal agenda. That is exactly what Harper is doing. The market should rule. The people are not as important as the market. The people are there for the pleasure of the market. That's what he's saying. Mr. Marker supported, for example, Margaret Thatcher. Let me read to you what he said in 2001 in the legislature of Quebec. A government should never pretend it can replace the private market. It does not work. Marker said in 2001, quote, "It did not work in England up until Thatcher's time. That's what they tried. The government stuck its nose everywhere. Interventionism is a failure. A government can create the condition conducive to the creation of jobs, but the best way for a government to create wealth is to let the private market thrive and to get off the back of businessmen and women." This is right of Genghis Khan, and Margaret Thatcher.
And now, it's right like Stephen Harper.
And now this guy claiming that he's concerned. He's for the ordinary people. We can, that's why people little by little are seeing through who he really is, and his number is going down. And I predict his number is going to go much further down because the jig is up. Mr. Marker, when he was running for his leadership campaign, he got a contribution from powerful capitalists like Jerry Schwartz of Onyx Corporation and Anthony Monk of Barrick Gold, the Monk debate, So these and many other big capitalists in Bay Street, they put money
into his campaign for the leadership of the NDP.
Of NDP, yes. And now we see the gentleman that talk about, this is not the NDP of Jess Woodworth and Tommy Douglas. Yeah. This is the NDP of corporate interest NDP, because now he's supporting F-35. Everybody knows this is a boondoggle, And now the Social Democrats are pushing for buying F-35. This is crazy.
Yeah, like just touching back on though the looking at Mulcair's place in the polls. Theoretically, there's been a new poll released saying that he slipped into third place and all that. Now, do you think that he was actually ever that popular, that the pollsters were really finding that he was in first place? Or do you think perhaps that was a manufactured situation and now they're letting him drift back to where he traditionally has been?
If you look at the polls in 2013-14, you see Mr. Marker is in third place, and Mr. Trudeau is in first, and Harper in between. And then if you look at all the by-election that happened since 2011, NDP did not do good in them. And we saw what's happened in Ontario, the Ontario election. The NDP went and pushed for the Conservative and become a right-winger actually in that election. And the people of Ontario see through it and did not vote for them. That's why Liberals got the majority. And I think the same thing is going to happen. In Ontario, people are going to, those that wanted to Mr. Harper gone, those votes are going to go to the Liberals. But still, I should say, right now, Mr. Harper is the winner. If the election happened today, regardless of what the poll said, he is going to have much more seats than Liberals, even if Liberals are ahead on 33% and Mr. Harper is 31%. You know, he's going to have.
Is that because of the seat distribution?
Seat distribution is going to be 133, 135 for the Conservative, and maybe around 100 for the Liberals. So they are going to have a much higher seats, and they are going to be the winner of the election. People have to realize that. And the question is why the so-called opposition is not talking about the record of the Harper. And I am suggesting the reason they are not talking about it because they don't want to change those harsh austerity measurements that Mr. Harper adopted.
Wow. So, I mean, I say the whole election is a sham. And I think you're kind of saying the same thing, that the parties are kind of playing a game.
It is ridiculous. Yesterday you saw the debate. The debate
Monk
happened.
debate.
Yeah, the Monk debate. First of all, the debate was among 3,000 people were there present, and these are mostly Monk members. You know, they pay between $35 to $100. They are the elite of the society. They are mostly right-wingers, you know, neoconservative type. The Monk institution is a neoconservative institution. And when they were saying something, Mr. Harper making a statement, and they were clapping, creating an impression for the audience that is at home that the people of Canada like what was hearing, you know, when they were pushing for war, calling, for example, Mr. Putin is the aggressor, you know, which is a ridiculous notion. If anybody want to look at who is the aggressor in Ukraine, just go and look at the map, you know, and see when Canada sent their gunboat to the Black Sea, who is provocative?
That's right. We're sending
who's
ships
aggressive?
to
You know,
the Russian
the
coast.
Russian borders.
Yes.
You know,
And troops.
and also they don't tell the fact about what's happened with the coup in Ukraine. But we see all three parties, leaders, are saying the same thing when it's come to foreign policy. Why? Because they adopted a neoconservative agenda in terms of foreign policy. And they adopted a neoliberal agenda when it's come to economy and market.
So
We are done. We are cooked. Unless we start realizing what is happening to our society, what are they doing to us, and what is the solution. A small part in going towards solution is not to engage these guys. You know, maybe in Victoria, in Vancouver Island, we go a different way. We say no to all these three sets of stooges of the elite and go with the Greens. I'm not saying that they are the solution, but is the best choice right now it is to choose the Greens, because if we send them there to the Parliament, they are going to be in constant dialogue with their constituents. They promised that. They said that they are going to have at least 9 public accountability meetings each year with their constituents. And I think that would be very, very important, because in those meetings, we can start talking about what people want and push them to go back to Parliament and talk about people's agenda and people needs, not the market needs, not the elite needs.
You know, Mehdi, you've been saying that for years about the importance of our elected representatives meeting with us. And when you first started to talk about it, I didn't think it was an important issue. But just the fact that none of them will do it, except for the Greens, means there's something very wrong here. Like, none of our elected representatives, once the election is over, have time for us. But they have lots of time for the people at the top.
And by the way, the Barrick Gold, the Monk debate, just in September 12 of this year, just a few days ago, there was a massive release of toxic waste and toxic material laden with cyanide in a mine in Argentina.
One of Barrick's.
Barrick Gold mine.
And that's who Monk
and
is,
is
the Monk debate.
devastating the huge area of Argentina. Barrick Gold is involved with lots of problem in the state of Nevada with the First Nation, in Tanzania, in Papua New Guinea. Nobody talk about that type of foreign policy. What kind of foreign policy is this? That we send this so-called Canadian corporation to devastate the life of the people in third world countries, in developing countries, and then they say, oh, we don't know why they hate us so much. Yeah. What did we do?
That sounds a lot like the Imperial Mines disaster here in British Columbia, you know. Hardly, after about a week, it was hardly being mentioned anymore. And, you know, the rivers and the lakes have been poisoned forever practically. But still, though, Mehdi, I agree with you that I think we have to be taking our own path. And I agree that we see what the actions of the NDP have taken in the last provincial election and the federal election, and you look at their campaign managers and all the skullduggery that went on in our election appears to be a rerun again federally. So I think we have to find another way, and I think the public has to get more engaged.
And Mehdi, you said earlier when we were talking that there's no talk of homelessness or poverty in this election either.
No, it's because the market. See, because of that overwhelming views that we should just concern about the market. And then the people don't have any, they are not considered.
We're out of time. Mehdi, thank you very much. Walt, thank you very much. And thanks for watching this episode or this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, September the 29th. We're going to be talking about something that is a very big and very important issue. Our guest in this segment is John Farquharson, and we're going to be talking about sewage treatment. Now, John, when this latest edition of the sewage treatment plan began, I attended all the meetings. You know, there was a democratic process, we were told, that was in place, and I went to several meetings and did what I was told, because that's sort of what it was. You did what you were told. But since then, even though I've tried, I've completely lost touch with what's going on. And I think very important things are happening that nobody seems to know about. So I hope you know about them, or we're going to have to cancel the segment.
Well, I'll do my best here in terms of updating you. So I'll put my director of the Sewage Treatment Action Group hat on, and I've been trying to follow the file for a long time, and have been down in the last 3 or 4 months to talk to you get 4 minutes, right, to do your thing at the CRD, at the Sewage Committee, or at now they have 2 standing committees, the east side and the west side, and on paper, things are rolling along, and the due date for an approved plan is next March. And before that, the next big, I guess, date would be to come back to the public late fall, possibly as late as even early January with analyzed and costed proposals from both the east side and the west side. My concern is that, boy, if you're not going to be able to bring back options, costed options, until then, and then you've only got, you've got a really small window between then and the end of March when the supposed decision has to be made.
Now, my concern is that they're costing and looking at the wrong proposals. I think what people want is a good look at some innovative, tertiary, far-sighted, modern ideas. But I don't think, I don't think they're really looking at that. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's hard to tell because a great many decisions have been made to date. Sites have been limited, option sets have been developed, and the technology, what constitutes sewage, wastewater treatment, and resource recovery, some definitions have been put together. For example, the official depiction of tertiary treatment is that it's a treatment that follows secondary. That was in the orientation program for the members of the Core Area Liquid Waste Management Committee. And my concern is that these decisions have been made prematurely in the sense that you've limited sites, you've limited option sets, and you've also now begun to construct certain ideas of what constitutes sewage treatment and how it's done. And there's, like you say, there are innovative ways of doing tertiary that don't follow secondary. The process, they can be done in such a way that they don't have to be an add-on process. They are done instead of. So you go basically from primary treatment directly to tertiary treatment. Do not pass secondary.
So my concern is that once again, the public has no idea of what's going on. I've been trying, I've made phone calls, I've sent emails to try and find out. They've hired a company called Urban Systems to analyze a few options. But I've tried to find out what options are they looking at.
Well, apparently, on the east side, there's three options. One is they're called 1A and 1B, and they're in 1A and 1B are centralized options in Rock Bay.
In Rock Bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one would serve the region, and one would just serve the east side.
Okay, so we have 1A and 1B, but you said there were three.
And there's reference to looking at a distributed system. One of my more recent concerns was looking at the terms of reference for the charter, if you will. There's a project charter, and in that project charter, they describe what Urban Systems is going to do, and basically they're going to analyze 1A and 1B, and they're going to look at a distributed system.
Well, there are probably 6 or 8 or 10 alternative distributed systems that might work, or am I off base in saying that?
Well, there are a number of sites still potentially in play.
But I'm talking about systems, different systems that we could buy. Are there several, or do you know?
Well, the two big systems that seem to be on the table is whether or not you're going to meet minimal requirements of just doing a secondary treatment.
But if we were going to do tertiary,
yeah,
and we just said, okay, we're going to do tertiary, we want the best, how many would we be choosing from?
Oh, the numbers change. I get the sense that it's going to be somewhere between 6 and 10 plants. There was a distributed option that
No, but I'm saying if we wanted to buy the equipment and choose the one we want, are there different systems out there that we can buy?
Different technologies?
Yes, different technologies.
They're out there, and Vic Derman, who's the director, Saanich councillor, has been absolutely persistent that we go to the private sector and get their best and brightest ideas. These are the people who actually provide the technologies, pardon me, and find out what they have to offer. And again, on paper, there's going to be some sort of allowance made for bringing in the best and the brightest options for consideration. My concern is that the decisions that are being made now in terms of limiting sites, limiting definitions of how tertiary follows secondary, they're all being put into place prematurely before the private sector has an opportunity to showcase the best and brightest ideas. By
So
the time
the
they
best
come on
and
board,
brightest ideas, again, are not being allowed in, which is how we got into this disastrous mess in the first place. This has been the CRD plan from the beginning, is to force down our throats the project that they want. And we keep getting told now by the mayor of Victoria, who's the chairman of this thing, that it's a democratic process, the public has been involved, and the media tells us the same thing. But there doesn't seem to be the process that you can find anymore. It's kind of disappeared behind a wall, and once again, it doesn't seem to be giving us what I think people want.
well, I understand the concern that things seem to have disappeared, because I feel to a large degree, I'm dealing with the same issue. Things have seemed to have disappeared. And again, the promise is that they're now being analyzed and costed. Okay, so all of the technical experts at work analyzing and costing, and that they will reemerge in the near future, like I say, late fall, with fully costed and analyzed options for the public to again consider and provide feedback on.
But the options will be very, very, very limited, and not necessarily the ones we wanted looked at in the first place.
Well, that's my concern, because again, I go back to Director Derman's absolute, full court press for getting the best and brightest ideas from the private sector, and I just don't see that mechanism, kicking in, or when it does kick in, it'll be too late, because premature decisions will have already been made that will eliminate some of the best and brightest options that the private sector have to offer.
Now, you said the plan is for a final decision to be made in March.
That's the plan. That's what shows on the
6 months
timescale.
from now.
I know, and if you don't have the options until very late fall, and possibly early in the new year, I mean that leaves you absolutely no time for the public to weigh in and provide informed feedback on which of these options, if any, they are particularly
So once again, I think the plan has already been made. It's been made by the people who run this city. They're running a process that the media and politicians are going to tell us is open and honest and democratic, although the public isn't involved anymore and never was. I mean, I was at the...
Well, we were involved, but the problem with the involvement is that
it was controlled.
well, there were only, I'll give you an example of they were going to take advantage of existing infrastructure, right? But when we all went out to those workshops and looked at the different sites and made comments on them, the sites that weren't there during those workshops were the pump stations. And apparently pump stations are ideal components of a distributed tertiary system. So they called the public in to comment on a lot of sites, but they didn't get to comment on the pump stations. The pump stations have since then been reintroduced to the process, so now they're under consideration. But again, it was the public was short-circuited in a number of ways. And that was just one of them, not getting to comment on all of the sites that they, I think, should have been able to comment on.
And we keep getting told that the site numbers have been reduced. I attended the meeting where the site numbers were supposedly reduced. And we were told, reduce the sites. So that's sort of what we did, but we didn't eliminate any.
Well,
we just said, of the 10 available, these 4 are the best.
Yeah.
But then we were told, oh, those sites are eliminated now. So sites haven't been eliminated by the public. They're putting words in our mouths.
Well, even if, if some of them have been, let's say downgraded considerably, several of the directors, Director Derman, Director Brownhoff, Director Young, Director Plant, all expressed concern that the information that was provided to the public to comment on the sites, to evaluate them, assess them, give some high scores, some low scores, it was done without the the requisite information. That they were acting, I think it was Director Plant said, it was a fear-based approach. And so when you have a fear-based approach and you ask people to comment on it, then you're not going to get a very open and considered opinion at the end of the day.
John, thanks very much for doing this. we're out of time, but everybody has got to keep an eye on the sewage treatment thing because they're going to do it to us again if we don't. Thanks very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. Our guests in this segment are Glyn Ramkissoon, theosophist and member of the Nemeton Collective, and Sorcha McEwen, cultural historian and member of the Nemeton Collective. And we're going to be talking about the need for transformation in a global society. So, Sorcha, given that you are a cultural historian and Glyn is a theosophist, how and why do you two work together?
Well, we come from very different backgrounds. Mine is more information-based. Perhaps it could be referred to as scholarly, but not necessarily academic. Glyn comes from performance art background and what might be actually a more spiritualized background. But when we both met, we discovered very quickly that there was a tremendous commonality, not just between how we agreed about things, but the way that we saw or thought that things need to be going in terms of the current global crisis that we're looking at. There's multiple ideas, but talking about them necessarily doesn't have a good or even a beneficial outcome, as you were mentioning earlier. So Glyn and I began to talk about how we actually can transform the way that we look at society works. Look, we all know the old models don't work, and if we keep going back to the drawing board with the old models, we're going to keep recreating the same scenarios. And it doesn't matter whether it's the efficacy of fossil fuel consumption or some sort of redemptive vision of the apocalypse. This stuff is not going to take us forward into a place where anyone is going to have a decent story to tell. Victoria is a beautiful place, but we're very likely living in the halcyon afterglow of an economy and an environment that is going to degrade at a frightening, frightening rate. We have to change not just the way we think about things, we have to change the way we look at things.
So Glyn, in the face of a global crisis, which Sorcha has referred to, how do you describe a new way of looking at things?
Succinctly, I've prepared something today that I'd like to read. I believe that would answer that question appropriately. A new consciousness. A new consciousness and a totally new morality are necessary to bring about a radical change in the present culture and social structure. This is obvious, yet the left and the right and the revolutionary seem to disregard it. Any dogma, any formula, any ideology is part of the old consciousness. They are fabrications of thought whose activity is fragmented. The left, the right, the center, as an example. This activity will inevitably lead to bloodshed of the right or of the left, or as we have it today, ladies and gentlemen, totalitarianism. This is what is going on around us, about us. One sees the necessity of social, economic, and moral change, but the response is from the old consciousness, thought being the principal actor. The mess, the confusion, and the misery that human beings have gotten into are within the area of the old consciousness. And without changing that profoundly, every human activity, political, economic, or religious, will only bring us to the destruction of each other and of this precious earth. This is so obvious to the sane. One has to be a light to oneself. This light is the law. There is no other law. All the other laws are fragmented and contradictory. To be a light to oneself is not to follow the light of another, however reasonable, logical, historical, and however convincing. You cannot be a light to yourself if you are living in the dark shadows of authority, of dogma, of conclusion. Morality is not put together by thought. It is not the outcome of environmental pressure. It is not of yesterday, of tradition. Morality is the child of love, and love is not desire or pleasure. Sexual or sensory enjoyment is not love. Freedom is to be a light to oneself, then it is not a distortion, a thing conjured up by thought. Actual freedom from dependency, attachment, the craving for experience. Freedom from the very structure of thought is to be a light to oneself. In this light, all action takes place, and thus it is never contradictory. Contradiction exists only when the light is separate from action, when the actor is separate from his or her actions. The ideal, the principle, is the barren movement of thought, and it cannot coexist with this light. One denies the other. Where the observer is, this light, this love, is not. The structure of the observer is put together by thought, which is never new, never fresh, never free. There is no how, no system, no practice. There is only astute seeing. That is the doing. You have to see, not through the eyes of another. There is only light. This light, this love, this law is neither yours or that of another. This light is love.
Thank you, Glenn. Beautifully said. And Sorcha, now, how does this apply to the average member of the public, like myself?
It's all about the average member of the public. History, and I can speak at length about this, is representative and symbolic of hierarchical forms of thought in which a few sit at the top and the mass of misery resides at the bottom supporting the top. The difference now is this. 700 years ago, if you looked out your door, if you opened your front door and there was 15,000 Mongols sitting in front of your door, there was a certainty that your world as you knew it was about to come to an end. Worse, you heard that there was plague in the village down the road. Once again, your world is coming to an end. What the average member of the public faces now is that the world is likely to come to an end. And I'm not saying that it's going to be mass extinction, but what I am saying is that the life that we have known it is on the way down the road. That involves the populace and the social force of social media, for the first time in history facing a crisis we have never faced the likes of before, is the ability for the people at the bottom of the pyramid to know what is going on and to make change. And the way that they do that is the way that they pay attention and the voice that they bring forward. And those are not just new ideas, those are new models and new ways of being. It has been said that if you change the human heart, the culture will follow.
Is this an alternative application of what's called mindfulness?
Glenn?
Mindfulness. This is not meditation. Mindfulness is a word that is a buzzword today. This is more intention. The ability to stand and be accountable and responsible for one's behavior. And the only way of doing that is to seek struggle in the self. Pure intention.
So, Sorcha, what is the practical application
How do you make this
of
practical?
all of this?
What's the measurable outcome?
Yeah.
Well, that's what the Nematon Collective is about. The Nematon Collective is an umbrella term that's going to involve several different modalities. We believe, Glenn and I believe, and in speaking to many people, the idea seems to be quite present, that the brain reveals remarkable plasticity. People used in the ancient schools of transformation, the masters knew this, but they didn't have the vernacular. Now we have the science. And the science tells us that with the deliberate use of intention and attention, we can actually change the way that we see. And if we change the way that we see, we can change the way that we are. So the Nematon Collective is going to be conversation, it's going to be workshops and seminars, including instructions and learning. It's going to have, there's an active component of heart rate-based biofeedback, which monitors the presence and the capacity to accelerate embodied presence. There's an aspect which is an informal think tank, which is known as the W4 Club. It will involve performance art, music, and poetry, and the potential in the long run for short-term residential retreats in which all of those different methods could be involved to actually change the way that people interact with one another in a form of social converse that will create a collective sense of learning. And hopefully out of that, in this time of crisis, there will be a kind of social maturity that will emerge from the average member of the public. People are sick and tired of the exploitation of the vulnerable, of the poor, of the sick, of the disabled, of the underprivileged, of the Syrian refugees. People are sick and tired of it. This may be the first and only time in history when that voice is able to come forward as a force.
And if people want to know more, they can get in touch with
Both
Either
of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorcha and Glyn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.